Cordi, welcome to Talking Energy. Thanks very much for your time. Let's start with you. Who are you? How did you get up into the world of energy?
So I've been in energy my whole career actually, just over 18 years now. Come from the north of England, from quite humble background, and used education to get where I've got to today. Actually did a law degree, so most people are quite surprised to see that I moved into energy. But I literally fell into it through a job offer at Yorkshire Energy back in the day of regional electricity companies. Got really interested in operating the system from a gas shipper's perspective and decided not to do law school and to stay on and have a permanent career in energy.
Wasn't it a bit bizarre? I mean, all your friends, and they think, what the hell are you doing? Energy, and particularly in those days, deadly dull, and a law career, you know, glamour and all of that.
It was a really formative time for the industry. So it was in the 90s. There had been a physical traded market for gas, but there wasn't a financial one, and that was being developed at the time. And I managed to get on the top table for some of those discussions, and I could see a really exciting opportunity whereby energy was going to become more commoditised, there were going to be new entrants coming in, and actually being at the start of something like that could offer lots of opportunity.
Did you think any of your, your legal background, did that come in handy at all? You know, scrutinising things, looking at things, or was it, completely different learning curve?
I think law is an excellent foundation of skills. It asks you to apply judgment to quite difficult decisions. It asks you to use your logic to work through complex situations. It asks you to substantiate your arguments with really good evidence, and I find that's really helpful, whether that's negotiating an industry framework, looking at a commercial contract, understanding how to translate policy. So I think there's some really just great skill sets from doing law that you can apply in any business, and I've found them really useful in energy.
Apart from the fees, of course, because you can't charge those now. When we talk about, you're now one of the leading characters. If people talked about the energy industry, you're there. There aren't many women still. How do you feel about that? How did you feel the last 18 years? I assume you're probably one of the few women in meetings, in boardrooms. Yeah. Was it difficult? Was it easier? How did you find it?
I think it's been a journey, to be honest. I worked for Centrica for 16 years and joined there as a trader. There weren't many female traders back in the 90s, and I remember the first girls' night out in gas trading, and there were 4 of us. But by the time I left, 4 years later, to start trading electricity, there were 20 of us on a night out. So I think over time, women have been seeing more and more the opportunity and range of roles, and I've done quite a vast range of roles. As I've gone through those 18 years, more women are joining. I see more in the sort of commercial front office roles than ever before. Where I feel we've still got a major challenge is some of the more technical roles, and particularly the engineering roles.
Well, that's what I was going to talk about. I mean, STEM has come up, STEM didn't exist when you and I were at university. There wasn't no such phrase. We are seeing more girls going into sciences and stuff, but that's still not translating into the industry. Why do you think that is? I
still think we need to do a lot more work on understanding the industry, the appeal of the industry, the range of exciting roles and opportunities. We're doing a lot of work as National Grid around that. So not only saying, yes, please start encouraging more girls to study science, technology, engineering and maths, but also inviting them into our business. So we actually do host a lot of schools, even at one of my operational sites in Wokingham, where we invite girls' schools in to say, look, if you do these kinds of subjects at school, these are the kind of roles that might be available. And I think there's a lot that businesses can do to show young girls and young women the just vast range of opportunity that the energy industry provides.
You're the only female so far I've interviewed in Talking Energy. Yeah. There are no women out there when we go to the events, about 5-10%. Is there a degree of latent sexism that's there, or do you think that's not really the case? It's just the way it is that women haven't found the way into the career?
I haven't found it to be sexist, no. I've found that it is merit-based, so you do need to have the right experience and education as a sort of entry ticket level in. I think there's more we can do as an industry to support women coming in, and really there's a huge role for us as male and female leaders to encourage and bring women up through the organisation. I'm chair of Women in National Grid, and I think we're making quite a lot of progress with that, but there's still a lot of conversations to be had around how do we mentor and support women, how do we grow confidence, how do we ask women to see a broader range of opportunity, actually adopt some of those great things that men do. They put themselves forward earlier, they learn on the job rather than women tend to feel they need to have ticked all the boxes of the job requirement before they put themselves forward. So I think there's a lot I'd like to do around having the right conversations around support, mentoring, bringing women through, and then also having the right conversation with women, and I do mentor quite a few, to say, how are you taking it forward? What can you make of this? And encouraging more confidence, more career resilience around choices, and just putting themselves out there. One of the best sort of things that happened to me in my career was back a long time ago. I'd entered a new role, was managing a portfolio of gas assets, and was quite clear that I could probably do more. And I thought, why isn't my boss giving me this opportunity? I've worked hard, I've demonstrated knowledge.
Did you ask for it?
And I spoke to my mentor about it and said, I don't see why he isn't giving it to me. And my mentor said, well, I've spoken to him and he's just waiting for you to take it. And there's something about the confidence, once you've gathered some skill and experience, to put yourself out there and to take. So I think, as an industry, we need to have, some better conversations. How do we support and sponsor women? How do we select those great ones that are maybe hiding in the corner and show them opportunity and encourage them through? And then as women, speaking to other women, how can we share our stories and give them confidence to move forward?
I think the thing that's probably going to encourage that over this next 5 years is the energy department is now run by women, isn't it? I mean, we have Amber Rudd and you've got now an all-female energy department. Are you hopeful that a new change in the Department of Energy could help some of these things?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a big believer in role models, and if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I think there are some great female leaders in energy now. They need exposure, they need to share their stories, and women then can sort of relate to that and say, how do I get there? How did they get there? What stories and experiences can be shared? And I think there is something about, as you progress through your career, that female leaders do need to give back. They do need to share their stories. They do need to show encouragement and support, which is why I'm so proud to be chair of Women in National Grid.
Right, well, enough of being a woman. Let's talk about working in National Grid, and let's talk about the big challenges ahead. So let's cover a couple of things. First of all, right now, I think the big issue facing many businesses is the cost of energy. And one of the things they're talking about is how to become more energy efficient. What are you doing about that? How are you going to work with companies to help them reduce their usage over the next few years? Because we all know commodity prices are going up, but your charges are also going up. So it's a question about energy efficiency.
So it's a really important year for us in National Grid because we want to put a lot more focus on demand-side response. Historically, the way we've operated the system is that we'd have large thermal generation units and generation would follow demand. Now with the decarbonisation agenda, we see a lot more intermittent generation from wind and solar, and that means quite a fundamental shift in the way we consume electricity. So demand will follow generation over time. And what that means is that we think there's an enormous opportunity for businesses to look at how they utilise how they use energy. And actually, is there an opportunity for us to construct both new services and products whereby users can move their energy demand away from expensive peak periods and actually consume more electricity when the wind is blowing and energy costs are lower.
So what are you going to do that? How are you going to incentivise people? Because I assume it means cash.
So at the moment, we already do some service provision with demand-side providers, and it is absolutely about showcasing an opportunity, a new income stream for businesses that ultimately is more cost optimal than us doing more traditional forms of services and balancing tools.
When you talk about that, the truth is, though, businesses are having to operate in leaner times with competition. If you say, come and switch off your power for 2 hours a day, well, I might say, well, how the hell am I going to compete? How are you going to choose which companies do this? Because it can't fit everyone, can it?
Some of that we think is around education, understanding the opportunity. Some of it's around how do I get involved. Some of it will be for National Grid to say, how do I innovate? How do I create new toolkit that actually gets this market, these new providers involved, engaged and understanding. And some might be with government and regulator to say, have we got all the incentives in place like we would see in a generation-led sort of toolkit to make this happen. So it is a broader conversation. It will rely on collaboration, but ultimately if we can avoid the cost of building new infrastructure, and if we can create opportunities for business, for new income stream, that ultimately leads to a lower consumer bill for balancing the system, that's got to be good news for everybody.
At the end of the day, whatever we do in demand side, if you pay people to switch off at certain times, I'm paying at the end of the day. The consumer has to pay, don't they?
Yeah, and that's why we've got to say, how is this an opportunity for business, but how is the overall net cost of operating the system reduced? And part of the work we'll be looking at is to say, we're incentivised as a system operator by the regulator to be innovative, to lower costs for consumers and lower that overall cost of balancing the network. We want to have that dialogue with businesses because we believe there should be options for them to change the way they consume electricity in this new world, and ultimately that be a lower cost product than maybe some of our more traditional tools.
Businesses talk to us and they say, it's all very well for the National Grid. They're kind of, they can get away with it. They're Teflon because the suppliers get it in the net when prices go up, and yet the non-commodity part of the business bill is going, they're set there. You're a monopoly. You kind of seem to have this way of, hey, it's not really affecting us. We're just, passing the power on to you. How accountable is National Grid to the cost of energy? How accountable are you to the businesses out there who say, why am I paying so much for you to send the power to me?
Yeah, I think we're incredibly accountable. The very fact that we are a monopoly business means we are heavily regulated. Our part of the energy bill is the most scrutinised part of the energy bill of the whole sector, actually. And through the Rio price deal, that the energy industry scrutinised what returns we were allowed to make, and the regulator placed very specific incentives on us to be incredibly efficient and to innovate for lower cost solutions for customers. So I think from that perspective of we are regulated, our bill costs are transparent, and we put a lot of rigour through the regulatory deal on efficiency and consumer benefit. I think that's compelling versus a lot of the other elements.
But do you think you should be having more conversations with businesses? Because they've kind of, they've had to deal with suppliers, obviously, but they don't really talk to DNOs, they don't talk to National Grid as much. Is that something that you need to explore as those, to say, hey, look, this is the reason you've got this transmission charge?
Yeah, I mean, we're in active dialogue with all of our customers, and it's important to have an open and transparent understanding of the bill, and we're very willing to do that. I think we also like to talk about the investments that we make. That's a critical component of doing our job well, making sure our networks are maintained and meet the efficiency, reliability and safety standards that our customers expect.
Let's talk about that network. You were built at a time where it was a power station sending it down to my plug. And now my plug might be sending it back up to you. Decentralised energy, on-site generation from businesses, from homes, solar panels. Is the grid in any way, shape or form ready to take this challenge on? Because your infrastructure is ageing. You're now going to have to create sort of smarter grids and also two-way grids. Where are you on that?
This has been a process of evolution. This isn't new in the sense of it's just happening today. And what we've seen through the decarbonisation agenda is very, very different types of generation technologies connecting to our grid. That means we've fundamentally got to operate the system under different circumstances and criteria. So that isn't bad news, it's different. And so we've already been rising to the challenge of dealing with the increased connection of wind, the intermittency and the characteristics that offers, the increase in embedded generation and solar PV. All of that means that we've got to up our game in understanding the impact of those technologies on the energy balance and on network operability. And over the last few years, we've really developed our forecasting tools, for example, so we can understand, when's the wind blowing, what's that mean for the energy balance, what does that mean for some of the network operability challenges we might have. So this is an evolution for National Grid. This isn't about standing still because the market's not standing still.
Is the grid having to face a big challenge from being something that was an engineering product to being something that's a digital product? If we have smart metering, and we all know the rollout has some issues, but we are going down that role. If we have fridges that can talk to the grid, if I can, use my watch to talk to my boiler, how are you going to cope with all that data? And how is the grid, which is traditionally a mechanical cables, wires structure, going to cope with digital information?
We see a future, a much smarter future, and this year we'll publish our future energy scenarios in July. That looks out over a much longer time horizon and says, what could these new smarter energy future worlds look like? In particular, we're seeing over time more intermittent generation, more embedded generation. The implications for that is new technology providers coming to market. So we see a world where actually energy storage, electricity battery storage could achieve scale within the market. We see a world that's evolving with electric vehicles. So we may only have 9,000 at the moment, but we could be up to 3 million by 2020 with the right environment. So we do see this evolution over time into a smarter world. And yes, the smart meter rollout combined with really good time of use tariffs means that the way we interact with demand and how that impacts our network will absolutely change.
But are you ready for that change? I mean, are you putting in the structures to deal with kind of the high-tech side? And how does that, what I'm trying to get is, how are you going to interface it to my old-fashioned meter that's got a cable in it, or the power cable?
As I've said earlier, this is going to be an evolution, working and collaborating with the right technology providers. We do invest quite heavily in various innovation projects. Typically that's now moving towards, what's that future smart world? Who are the new providers? Who are the new customer types and groups of our network? How can we understand the characteristics and nature in the way they may change how they use our networks and how that impacts operability? So as I say, I think this is an evolution. We study it intensely already. We're asked to provide some thought leadership through our future energy scenarios work. And I think what's critically important about that is that's not created in isolation. That is a huge customer stakeholder year-long process by which we say, what are these credible, plausible scenarios for the future? What could they look like? What are the implications for the energy system? And it's through that we then publish. So we need to work collaboratively across the industry. We need to look beyond the current year and look ahead to what could be a very, very different and dynamic future.
Let's talk about the future in terms of our margin. Now, everyone knows that we've been closing our thermal plants. Everyone knows that nuclear still hasn't got going. We are importing more gas. How tight? You must be doing the studies and looking at the scenarios. How tight are we to the day where actually the margin is so small that we're looking at potential blackouts? Or do you think that you're going to avoid that?
So we're constantly looking at what's the margin picture for the coming winter. We did a lot of work last winter, as you'd know.
And you said it was the tightest.
And it was one of the tightest we'd had for 7 years. We worked with government and Ofgem to say, have we got the right toolkit in place to balance the system on the tightest, darkest half hour? And through that, some new balancing services were created. Our supplemental balancing reserve, which is a generation product, and our demand-side balancing reserve, which is a demand-led product. And those tools allow us to hold some power stations and some demand-side responders in reserve for any sort of tight situations that we might face. We've gone through the same rigorous process this year for the coming winter. And actually we've procured everything we need ahead. So 2 weeks ago, we announced the full outcome of our tendering. We've bought, in effect, 2.5 gigawatts of reserve products for this coming winter. That is in response to the fact that we saw a tight market. We've always said that. And also we've seen some other power station closures since then. We will stay absolutely vigilant and focused throughout the summer. But the good news is we believe we've got the right toolkit for the situations and the scenarios that we've modelled. We've done that at a really competitive cost this year. We've seen prices come down through the tender. And really importantly, we've given certainty to those generators who are offering those services. We've given them much early certainty so they can make the plans and the investments they need around those assets to make sure they're ready, tested and available for the winter.
Do you think the capacity market will work? I mean, I was having a discussion with lots of people there. There were someone from the low carbon contracts company. It's very complicated. It's very complex. It's in its early stages. But, you know, if that doesn't work, it's going to make it very difficult for you to keep the lights on for us.
I do believe the capacity mechanism, CFD allocation, is an enduring market solution. We are the delivery body for government, so we administer the capacity mechanism auction, the CFD allocation. We work very hard to understand, you know, we provide the electricity capacity report, which is our recommendation, our independent study on how much electricity we think needs to roll through those mechanisms in order to have generation available. We work closely and consistently with industry to understand, you know, what's the investment climate, how are you refurbing your asset, how does this contract subsidise and help you keep generation available. And we ran our first successful auction last winter. We're obviously gearing up now to run the next auction for 1920. And also we'll be running a T-1 auction much closer to time. So there is an opportunity through the capacity mechanism to refine what we need, use the auction mechanism to do that.
You do a very complicated job. To end with, why'd you do it?
Oh, I think it's such an exciting industry. I've been in it 18 years, and you know, in one company for 16 of those, but I've never felt that I've had the same job. The market is constantly evolving and changing. I started when you know, UK was a gas island. It didn't need any imports. In fact, the interconnectors were being built to export gas. And now we've got a global gas market where we rely not only on pipeline, but we also rely on LNG and shipped gas. And on electricity, we're going through a fundamental shift away from, you know, more carbon intensive generation to more sustainable renewable energy. And all of those transitions, as well as harmonising with the European market, mean there's a lot to do, lots to think about, new customer stakeholders, new collaborations. So for me, there's never been a dull day. It's great use of the grey matter, and actually it's a very collaborative industry where actually together we can create some of the solutions, and it's really great to be part of that future energy mix.
And a female boss of the National Grid, whether it's you or someone else, female boss of the big 6 energy companies, you see that coming?
I think you should never say never. I mean, one of the big advantages, I think, for more gender diversity is representing your customer base. And I think, you know, there's lots to be gained from a female perspective on what your customers and stakeholders want. Where that sits in an organisation, you know, I couldn't determine that. But I think more diversity around that, I think, would create, hopefully, better thought through, more developed customer propositions and more innovation for business.
That's a very political answer. I like that one. Cordi O'Hara, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.